Testing 1, 2, 3. Someone in the chat want to show us quick signs of life? All right, cool. I see the emojis flying around. That's all I really need. All right, everybody, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. HandyCon Day 1 is going fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and say that right now. I'm super excited to introduce Andrew Lee. I think he goes by a lot of different names over the years. He definitely has a long list of accomplishments that we can all look into a little bit. I'm not going to try to list them all right now. Super excited about this project he's going to be presenting. And I'm going to give him the floor here. Please use the QA part of the chat so we can get the questions organized. And we'll try to get to all of them either now or shortly hereafter. All right, thank you guys. I'm going to hand it off.
All right, thank you, Alex. So yeah, hi everybody. I'm here to present a few things. Let me just open this slide. Right, here we go. So the Joseon Empire, it's a legally recognized nation state. And so it kind of just goes into an explanation about why we are doing this. So basically, burdensome regulation limits technological innovation. You know, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Uber situation a while back when there were like warrants for the CEO's arrest because Uber was illegal. You know, Ripple's had their fair share of issues with the government. AI is facing that today. All of the social media platforms, they're always getting called in by different governments for all sorts of reasons. You know, so the structure of like society's law, I don't know how many people have kind of like thought about this, but basically the way it's structured is that people are kind of in nations and they're subject to the laws of these nations. And there's many nations in the world, obviously, and all of these nations are not subject to each other's laws, but they do have treaties with each other. And all of this kind of makes up the kind of global legal system, let's call it, or the rule of law of the family of nations. And I just wanted to share like this little adage, which kind of is kind of like a compass for me. This is how I like, I guess, move forward whenever I do something. So, you know, somebody actually shared this with me and it's like super interesting. So when some dogs are faced with a fence that separates them between a bone and themselves, you know, they sit there and they like gnaw and claw at this fence and, you know, they don't really get anywhere. They feel like they're getting closer. They feel like they're taking the direct path, but they're just kind of in the same place. But there's other dogs who kind of walk along the fence and it actually seems like they're walking away from the bone, but they're actually able to find the end of this fence and there's no resistance between them and the bone after that. They're just home free. And I also wanted to just share this quote real quick from John Gilmore. He's one of the founders of the, actually he's not so much, but yeah, he's one of the founders of the EFF. And he said, the net interprets censorship as damage and routes around it. And I think that's kind of, you know, the general idea of what everybody, you know, who's involved in decentralized technologies is actually involved in. They're trying to actually create routes around blocks, so to speak. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about myself. You know, I've been an IRC user since 1996, for better or worse. You know, I've also ran a VPN company until, you know, 2019. That was a few years ago, or actually several at this point. You know, I've been a major donor to many open source and kind of like activism groups. A long time ago, I built a mobile app for an exchange. Yeah, it's just like I've just kind of listed stuff. But the important thing for this presentation here is I was early involved in Handshake, and also I inherited the crown of Joseon from His Imperial Highness Iseok, who is actually the final descendant of King Gojong of the Joseon Empire. And so a little bit about Joseon, in case anyone was wondering. Neo Joseon was actually founded in 1392 by Isongye. And one notable thing that I think a lot of people may already know, is that the fourth king of Joseon, Sejong, actually invented the Korean alphabet, which interestingly can be learned in a matter of a few minutes, in order to kind of make it easier for people who didn't have as many opportunities and time to actually learn to read and write in the system that was kind of like very difficult to read and write in back then. And so I just wanted to also share a note on international treaties. These are kind of agreements that, you know, like have internationally, since the beginning of time, been things that people have always, you know, been like under the impression that the deals would be kept, you know? And so, you know, something I wanted to share here from Joseon's treaty with the US, it says here in Article 1, there shall be perpetual peace and friendship between the President of the United States and the King of Chosen and the citizens and subjects of the respective governments. You know, in recognition of that, you know, we've, Joseon, actually, we've actually like obtained PresidentBiden.com, and we're holding that and protecting that, you know, in respect of this Article 1 treaty. So, you know, that being said, you know, although the U.S. promised perpetual friendship and protection to Joseon, former President Taft and former President Roosevelt actually secretly conspired with the Count, Prince, and future Prime Minister of Japan, Katsura, to arrange the invasion and takeover of Joseon by Japan. This was, you know, in the early 1900s. That being said, the King of Joseon, he never signed any annexation treaties. You know, but that being said, of course, you know, as most people know who follow history, Japan still belligerently occupied Joseon until 1945, and you know, it was a terrible time. You know, people lost their names, you know, which I know many of you value a lot. You know, but also their language, and there were so many unfortunate deaths, and just it was a terrible time. But you know, after nearly a half century of enslavement, Joseon actually was on the verge of becoming a, you know, after it was kind of freed, liberated, let's say, it was on the verge of becoming a democratic free state, you know, led by really this hero named Kim Gu. But, you know, the US unfortunately decided to invade, and, you know, the same amount of people that were killed, you know, in 30 something years under Japanese enslavement, you know, were killed in just 3 years under the US's military dictatorship. And, you know, long story short, this kind of effectively ended up splitting the physical land into two. So that's how you have the Republic of Korea and Democratic People's Republic of Korea. You know, I don't know about the DPRK, but the Republic of Korea wasn't actually initially spawned by the people, you know. But anyway, so in 1965, the Treaty on Basic Relations was signed between Republic of Korea and the Empire of Japan, which actually null and voided any annexation treaties, anything between Joseon and Japan. So, you know, Joseon was, you know, legally a nation still. And so talking about nation statehood, the Montevideo Convention, which is something that's usually cited by people who are interested in, you know, sovereignty and nation states and, you know, just international law generally, you know, it kind of states that there's like 4 requirements for a nation. And it's, you know, it's written here, but define territory, population, government, and the ability to kind of talk to other governments as well. Just to be clear, the Montevideo Convention isn't actually ratified by all, you know, nearly 200 countries in this world. It's probably only like less than 30, but it's still a pretty good, you know, I guess subjective test of, you know, if something even qualifies to be a nation. And so on that note, the Joseon Empire, you know, the 5 domains or territory as defined by the majority of nations and NATO are land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. You know, I don't think there's any nation out there who wouldn't consider their cyberspace territory their territory. And so thus, since cyberspace is territory, and again, like I said, NATO and most countries consider it to be as well, we do have territory in cyberspace. And so, to define our territory of Joseon, it's simply the sum of all cyberspace territory. And now we have defined territory as per the Montevideo Convention. So, that being said, again, the most important, as kind of noted in, anyone who's interested in sovereignty's statements, the most important test for whether a nation is actually a legal nation is, recognition by another recognized nation. And so Joseon's been pursuing that for quite some time. And in April 2022, we were actually able to secure a conditional agreement with Antigua for conditional recognition. But in 2023 of last year, Ambassador Perry was actually able to secure us a full diplomatic treaty with Antigua, laying to rest really any question as to whether Joseon's a legal nation or not. I just kind of put a note here stating because, there might be some, naysayers out there who may try to state that Joseon isn't a nation, but, they shouldn't forget that they're not the ones who define international law. International law is defined by the organs of international law, and only nation states have that responsibility and privilege. So anyway, Joseon Empire has 10 permanent and perpetual treaties. They all have the same language as the U.S. treaty I shared earlier. Well, except for the Antigua one. That's actually very different because, it's not, 100 years old. So Joseon, it's this basically what it provides is even laws against cryptography reach only so far as a nation's border and the arms of its violence. That's a statement by Eric Hughes in a Cypherpunk's manifesto. Other nations' laws have no meaning in Joseon. So Joseon's laws, of course, are designed to be right here, smack dab in the middle. If you see in this kind of like drawing, I guess, if you have anarchy, if there's no law, you can't really progress because you don't know if somebody's going to jump out and kill you. But if you have too many laws, you can't make progress because you can't even like take a step without breaking a law. So you have to be in the middle somewhere, like, with minimal laws to, maximize the freedoms for individuals and for society. And that's what Joseon does. So Joseon, it has a business ecosystem that, is regulated by the SEC of Joseon. And basically every company in Joseon has shares that are represented as, tokens on blockchain. In addition, Joseon has a denizenship, which basically lets people own and operate kind of like unique single instantiated corporations that, no one can transfer to other people and there can be no other shareholders of. So it's really just like a personal corporation kind of. And through that corporation, then people can participate under Joseon law. This is, akin to people, registering business or domiciling a business in some other country that they don't live in. And that country is now that company is now subject to that country's laws. It's basically the same thing. We're taking advantage of something that's become customary law. So Joseon is a bridge for the world of law and the digital world of freedom. You can like KYC with the Joseon ID on various exchanges. Right here, it's highlighted. It's latoken.com. There's companies who have, we call it quote unquote gone public in Joseon. And of course, just to make clear, I have no allocation of coins. I'm not getting anything out of this. I'm just trying to make sure it happens because our intention is to make everyone a king of their domain. That's our plan. We kind of put this checklist thing just because it's funny. But anyway, so what does it mean for Joseon to own Joseon on the Handshake identity blockchain? Okay, some people might be, not in agreement with some of the statements I'm going to make, but I'm a kind of like a hardline absolutist about a lot of things, so I'm just going to talk freely, and I apologize in advance. So the state of the internet today, ICANN and all the various stakeholders involved, they've just put too many moats around them. There's too many people making too much money with their tentacles all over the place. It's not going anywhere. Additionally, IPv4 is exhausted, leading to moats and centralization. And the World Wide Web of yesterday is just, it's forgotten. Like, it doesn't look anything like it used to. It looks more like cable TV, if anything. Most users on the internet are slaves as they consume their master services. So just some examples, because I can't say this without providing examples. GoDaddy's worth 16 bill. They're just not just gonna walk away from that. Their shareholders won't let them. They'll sue the people running the company if they try to walk away from that. Running a private email server is super difficult because you get flagged spam by all the major email providers. And it sucks. That's just a fact right now. Private messaging platforms exist since IP4 is exhausted. So basically, like, it's very difficult to communicate computer to computer on the internet because, like, there's no actual, like, external public interface that exists between most computers that are online. They're going through some kind of, like, router situation where, like, there's some NAT going on, so they don't actually have a real IP online, et cetera, which made way for lots of these different services to come about. What's Handshake? Handshake, to me, is a trusted, non-human third party managing the fair distribution and securing the ownership of unique human readable names tied to cryptographic keys. Hard stop, by the way. So why is this important? So for example, back in the day, on IRC, there were a bunch of, like, name thefts, and basically what ended up happening was people had to create, like, services, to hold your your nickname and your channel and everything like that. So it kind of brought about centralization in something that actually was purely really under the user's control prior to that. Even though it was on a federated IRC server, the users actually did have control of these things at the time. Why can't people share the same name? So a name's an identity. Among the early co-founders, both Andrew, Lee, and I share the same name. So, like, it actually has resulted in people when we have mutual contacts, people have actually sent emails to him for me and to me for him. And so we've had to, like, forward those to each other. And if you think about it, without a unique name, it's not even who you are, but what you are, because people just kind of try to describe you. And I mean, that could get messed up, So what's this mean? Names and their associated public keys, identity keys, ephemeral one-time use keys, batch pre-keys, metadatas, and so on can now be authenticated by the blockchain as a source of immutable truth in an open, transparent medium. So it's a new primitive. Services and web of trust are no longer needed for identity management. That's all thanks to Handshake, because now it's simply a primitive that exists. And so this is what I was saying. Some people might be upset, but Joseon is never going to seek a master-slave relationship in anything it does, whether it's relations with other nations, with its people, with technology. So immutable or not, secondary, second chain names, it's absolutely a novel concept. But Joseon believes everyone should be the king of their own domain. So in the Handshake vocabulary, that would be the king of their own TLD. Joseon seeks peer-to-peer relations with all nations and people of the world, not of that of a master slave. So, peer-to-peer communication also, by the way, it's just like mixing chains together. This stuff has become incredibly difficult. It's because of the exhaustion of IP addresses and NAT, and it's just unfortunate. are not communicating directly with each other, but they're communicating with some kind of provider. But there is another way to do this. Actually, IPv6 has been around since the 90s, and they actually, the engineers who designed this actually built it with device to device communication, which is peer to peer. As the that's one of the initial goals. So something I wanted to say is that we can't guarantee the future, but we can build the pillars on which that future stands on. And so, right now, adoption of blockchain technology in use, in velocity and use is pretty much at an all-time low, but the speculation on it is actually at an all-time high. So, this gives us a unique opportunity to actually put the base layer in place, while there's a lot of excitement and interest in all of this. And so, as a proof of concept of what's capable because of these primitives, with IPv6, for example, there's no bloat, you can just communicate peer to peer. And Handshake, because it's, the identity chain, it, removes the need for any kind of central service to manage all of that. And so an ecosystem not the kind of the architecture of this, POC is super simple. Basically, there's no such thing as a client or a server. They're all the same. They're just peers. But one of the peers basically just kind of, gets information about another peer that's trying to communicate with from the blockchain, and, sends a message to it, verifies everything, and vice versa. It just all happens direct and, much faster also because there's no central server to verify anything, etc. So yeah, this POC, I uploaded it on GitHub, so anyone can try it out. It's again, it's a POC, but there's a lot that can come with this. I wrote some notes in the README, but basically, chat rooms can really be the relays or the servers, and all messages can just be direct peer to peer, and obviously there's going to be some issues with privacy with people watching, packets going from IP to IP. So, onion routing can also be applied to mitigate that. So, to be king is to be free. We live in a world with, existing technological systems and existing social systems. Those are laws. So only when all of us are kings of our own domains, both technologically and legally, will actually be free. And we can actually do this now because Joseon as a nation can recognize other people as kings of their nations. And technologically, you can, have Handshake on the IPv6 internet and be your own entity online without relying on anything else, sovereign, so to speak. And this is how we can hack our way to freedom, both in tech and the world. Because basically, the only way to stop all of this kind of movement is to, do away with the laws of the past and the present and, the future, as well as do away with the ability to use technology. And I think that's going to be really hard. So, I think they're just going to have to join us in the end. So, yeah, that's the end of the presentation. And I hope it made sense and was, interesting to everybody that was listening.